Hey, this is Teresa with the Neon Angels, and this is our first episode of Neon Angels Power Hour. We're so excited to launch this out of the RCA Victor recording studios here on Music Square in downtown Nashville. Very historical place. We're very thankful for our producer, Aaron Lindstrom, um, and Color Sound Films for bringing this to you from Nashville. So I I'm the founder of an all-female rock band called the Neon Angels. Um, I was very heavily influenced by the Runaways, which is Joan Jett's first band, and she started when she was 15 years old. It blew me away, and I said that's what I want to do. So fast forward to maybe a couple years later. We lost in the Joan Jett community that's called Jet Heads. We lost a very dear friend of ours his name was Donnie Hall. He committed suicide, and we were already planning on releasing our first single in September of 22. And we later found out that that's National Suicide Prevention Month. So we made everything possible to release our first song, Perfect, in honor of Donnie, in honor of my producer, Brian Gamboa, his best friend and bandmate of 20 years, Ole Lingen, I hope I said that right, and my co-founder, Lisa Grimes, her nephew, Sean, that we lost that previous summer that Donnie took his life. Then fast forward to February of 23, and I lost my uncle to gun violence, suicide by gun violence. Then the Covenant school shooting was the first mass school shooting here in the Nashville, Tennessee area. And it happened in a private, religious, predominantly white school, upper class school, which sent a huge message out to the nation. And that kind of set in motion our cause for suicide prevention, all of those things. So since then, we've gone to protests and rallies, and we've met with legislators, and we've tried to change public policy regarding gun violence and public safety, suicide prevention, and all the things, because mental health awareness, it all ties together. So that's kind of a little bit of our background and our cause, and that is the premise of today's show as well. And I want to run a few statistics. Suicide, it's not obviously not a topic that a lot of people want to talk about voluntarily. But as we've gone around and talked to people and said this is our cause, and this is what we stand for and what we believe in and what we are fighting for, and this is what our music represents, people have opened up and said, oh wow, that's great, I lost a friend, I lost a family, I lost my cousin, my aunt, whatever. So we found out, unfortunately, how common it is, once people start talking about it and opening themselves up to that conversation. So suicide has actually become the 11th leading cause of death in the United States. In 2022, 1.5 million Americans attempted suicide, and 50,000 were successful. And despite this, though, 94% of Americans feel like suicide is preventable. So there's hope, there's light, there's a lot of great people out there fighting for this cause. And if you or someone is in crisis or even in a bad place, not necessarily suicidal, but just in a dark place, 988 is a number. It's just celebrated its 2-year anniversary this year. Anywhere in the United States, you can call. You anonymously, you can get help, resources. They will even follow up with you, and it seems like in the medical field, I work in the medical field, and it seems like the common thing that we see with folks who have attempted or thought about, it's not that they want to end their life necessarily, it's the situation that they're in that they don't want to be in, you know. But the lie of suicide tells you that it's your fault, you know, just ending your life will just make it all go away. But people don't think about what that means to families and their friends and how it's going to affect them, you know. So we're here to talk about that today, and talk about some of the resources and the people out here trying to prevent, you know, people from committing suicide, and realizing that there are other answers to the situation that you're in. You're not alone. And there's people out here that care. We care. There are lots of people that care. And here's somebody right here that cares. This is Hannah Quinn. She is the Greater Nashville Regional Director for the Tennessee Suicide Prevention Network. And I'm going to let her talk to you guys about her story and her organization and what they're about and how she came to be involved with them.
Thank you so much, Teresa. I'm really excited to be here. And I'm really glad that I'm kind of able to be in this role as the Greater Nashville Regional Director. The Tennessee Suicide Prevention Network has been around since 1998, and it was actually founded by Dr. Kenneth Tullis and his wife, Madge. They co-founded it, and it came from Dr. Tullis's personal experience. You know, he survived multiple suicide attempts, and so this was his life's passion. And as a result, now we have this statewide organization in the state of Tennessee that is completely dedicated to suicide prevention and to advocating for more support resources. Mm-hmm. And we also provide trainings for suicide prevention and really work in that advocacy space, as well as awareness, just making sure that people are aware of the resources that are available, and kind of breaking down some of that stigma that comes from misconceptions about suicide. For example, one thing that a lot of people believe is that if you talk about suicide, you're going to plant the idea into somebody's head. That, you know, if my friend's struggling and I say, hey, are you feeling suicidal? Have you thought about killing yourself? That somehow that'll spark an idea in their brain, and that will cause them to take their life, when we know that's actually not the case at all. And when we don't talk about suicide, when it stays this taboo topic, the people who are struggling with suicidal thoughts suffer as a result. And even people who haven't thought of suicide, you know, if they can't openly talk about their emotions with the people they trust the most, mm-hmm. that's a breeding ground for isolation, which we know that connection is protection when it comes to suicide prevention. And that when we're connected,
connection is protection. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I do too. And that goes for connected to people around us, connected to our community, connected to spirituality, whatever that looks like for us. Mm-hmm. Even in the spirit of gratitude, being able to look at the things around us and notice them, notice the things that we do have. That it can be really, really powerful. And for me, getting into this work, you know, I started as a volunteer for suicide prevention in 2017 when I was in my undergrad for psych. And since then, I have been grateful enough to have opportunities to train on suicide prevention and just learn more about what helps people when they're struggling, what resources are actually beneficial for people who are really struggling, and not just putting a Band-Aid over the issue, mm-hmm. or checking a box for an organization saying, you know, we're certified in suicide prevention, but what are these tools that we can use that really help us in times of struggle? And for myself, I am someone who struggled with chronic suicidal ideation. So starting around age 9, actually, was when I had my first suicidal thought. And I feel like that chronic suicidal ideation doesn't really get talked about a whole lot. And it leads to that isolation where you feel like you're the only person in the world who struggles with this. When, like the statistic you were mentioning, we know it was over 1 million people report having suicidal ideation throughout the year. So that doesn't even hit on the number of people who maybe weren't asked that question in the survey. How many people do have thoughts of suicide and just didn't mark yes because of stigma? That there are so many
Yeah.
people that struggle with this, and when we don't talk about it, that's why it keeps going. The cycle continues. And I know for me, you know, I'm an attempt survivor as well. I've had a couple of attempts over the years, and I'm very grateful to be here today and to be able to share my own experience, because as someone who's been there, I know when there's some kind of resource or something that just misses the mark. Like, okay, this should help, but really it just kind of misses the mark for people who are actually struggling. And also, as somebody who has lost a number of people to suicide, I know that there are so many people out there that are affected by this. And I know that a study actually showed that for every suicide in the US, it's estimated that 135 people are affected by that. So when we think of those 50,000 people
Wow.
who die by suicide times 135, that's probably I mean, I'm not great at math, but I feel like that's a good number of our population that are possibly struggling in silence with this issue when we don't talk about it.
So part of I think making it okay to talk about a safe space, non-judgmental space, no one blaming you for, you know, no one making you feel weak because you have you're having these thoughts, because I feel like it's more common than people realize. Some people maybe are going through a dark time. This is the holidays. My co-founder Lisa lost her sister on Christmas Day last year. She fought a long battle with MS, and that makes it even tougher. The holidays are already hard for people, but especially if they had a loss at that time, that makes it even harder. And then add in a lot of people, they spend time with family they don't normally see, and maybe those people trigger some things. It's just a tough time. We really wanted to get this episode out there before the holidays for that reason. In the medical field, the ER is quite busy with overdoses and attempts, violence, crime, all of the things go up. And all these things, they cross over the mental health awareness, suicide prevention, the gun violence, this trauma, abuse, like all the things, There's just so many. We were talking about this last night. I feel like I wish there's so many great organizations in this area, especially since the Covenant school shooting happened. All these like grassroots organizations have popped up. We're fixing to have Capital Day events, which is called Advocacy. They changed the name of it now. The AFSP, which I'm on the Public Policy Committee for the American Federation of Suicide Prevention Tennessee chapter, and we deal with we do the walks, the campus walks, and the Nashville walks. There's different counties that do walks. I think Rutherford County has theirs, and it's just where people come together and survivors of suicide. Artists will come together and perform. There was actually 5, I think. You mentioned a high school student. The last walk that we had, the week of the walk, 5 Tennessee students committed suicide that week. There was Vanderbilt, MTSU, which is my alma mater, Tennessee Tech, UT Knoxville, and then a high school here in Nashville, all in 1 week. And there was so many people that showed up, and that had a lot to do with it, you know. But that's where it starts. It's like, let's not wait for that next, thing to happen. Unfortunately, it's human nature. We don't want to do something about it until something bad happens, and then we're like, oh, we need to do something about this now, you know.
Yes. Yeah, that's why upstream prevention is so important. And that's uh, doing something before there is a crisis moment, making sure that we're prepared with the resources that we need, making sure that not only are we preventing suicide, but we're making life livable for people.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can keep someone from taking action to take their life, but when they're going back to that same situation that they're in where they feel alone,
Mm-hmm.
or they're in a really difficult situation with family, or don't have the things that they need, then that's an area where we can really make a big difference, is making life livable through connection and hope in whatever ways that can be fostered. And actually, if you don't mind, I have
Sure.
a bit of a story or parable that we like to tell in the upstream prevention world about a town along a river. And one day, one of the women of the town was walking her dog along the side of the river, and she heard a splash and heard someone calling out for help. And she saw that someone had fallen into the stream and was getting dangerously close to going over the waterfall.
Mm.
So she jumped in, fished the person out of the water, performed CPR, and saved the person's life. And everybody called her a hero. But then the next day, another person fell into the water and was getting dangerously close to going into the waterfall, and another. And she saved both of them. So then, the town realized this is a problem. We need to do something about this. So they built watchtowers right by the waterfall. They were like, you know what? We're going to make sure that nobody goes over that waterfall. They taught everybody in the town CPR so people could be helping. And one day then, after all of that was built, that same woman started walking upstream away from the waterfall. And everyone was like, hey, what are you doing? It's all hands on deck. We need you down here at the waterfall. She said, I know. And it's so important that we have all these resources so that people don't go over the waterfall. But I want to see if I can stop people from falling into the water in the first place.
Yes.
And that's really the essence of upstream prevention. We want to have those support resources, those crisis resources for when someone is in that, rough water moment close to going over the waterfall. But we also want to give people the tools they need so that they don't fall into the water at all. Or if they do, so they can get themselves out while the water's still relatively calm.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to tell that because...
That's a great parable.
Thank you, yeah. I think it just really illustrates a lot of the work that we're doing in suicide prevention, and how, of course, you have those crisis resources, but working on that upstream is life-saving in a big way.
That's so true. And I wanted to talk a little bit about knowing the signs. Obviously there's no, talking about or making plans for suicide. I mean, usually someone is not going to say, hey, I'm making a plan. You know what I mean? But maybe they might, expressing hopelessness about the future, displaying severe, overwhelming emotional pain or distress, showing worrisome changes in behavior, particularly in combination with the warning signs above, including significant withdrawal from or changing social connections or situations, changes in sleep, either they're sleeping more, sleeping less, anger or hostility that seems to be out of character or out of context, maybe a recent increase in agitation or anxiety. Now, these are all signs you may or may not see, but knowing these signs, whether you're a student or someone in your family, a friend, just being aware of, like, when something's different about someone, and just not ignoring that and saying, well, maybe one day, or if something is going on in their life, they're having a rough time, just recognizing that and reaching out to them, it may just be that's all they need is just somebody to listen, you know. But they may not show any signs, you know. Not there's no telltale this is what you look for, you know. They may not show any signs. So, but one thing you don't want to do if you do suspect that someone is um, thinking that way or in crisis is you don't want to leave them alone, especially if they've said I'm done. You know, if they've actually made that declaration, you don't ever want to leave that person alone, even if they tell you to. You know, at that point, they've said they're planning to take their lives, or they have intentions or thoughts or whatever. Um, you want to intervene. You know, at some point, somehow. How would you, like, if your friend or someone in your life said that to you? What's the do's and don'ts in a situation like that? Like, you don't just want to
Mm-hmm.
get, oh my God, 911. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah,
It depends on the situation. I know. I guess it depends on if they have means
it does.
to
Yeah.
do it, or
It,
if they're just saying, man, I'm just done, and I just,
mm-hmm.
what's the point, or whatever they're saying.
Yeah, and I think for family members and friends, it can be really scary when someone that you love, or even just someone that you have a close connection with, is sharing these thoughts. And if we haven't experienced them ourselves, or if, we kind of don't know what to do, it can be overwhelming. And one of the programs that we actually train with the Tennessee Suicide Prevention Network is called QPR, which stands for Question, Persuade, Refer. And in essence, that program can be broken down to just some basic steps to helping somebody who is in crisis, which is to ask the question, are you thinking of taking your life? Are you having suicidal thoughts? And just asking that question. And if the answer is yes, then that next part, persuade, would be to encourage them to seek help. Be like, hey, I see that you're really struggling, and I'm worried about you. I care about you, and I would feel more comfortable if we brought somebody else in on this that's an expert, because
Mm-hmm.
I'm not an expert here. And even if you are a family member and you work in this field, it's hard you can't be that expert with your loved ones. I mean, you can bring your expertise, but sometimes it's easier to have that third party professional to give their input. And so something else that I've thought of with 988, which we'll talk about that in a little bit, but 988, the crisis lifeline. You can chat online with them, call them, or text them.
Mm-hmm.
And something that I recommend to people is if you have a friend or family member or someone telling you that they're struggling or they're having suicidal thoughts and you feel like they should get some help and you don't know what to do, I would simply ask them, like, hey, I would feel more comfortable if we could just text 988 maybe and just ask them what their opinion is. Would you be okay with me texting 988, kind of telling them the situation and
Mm-hmm.
get some advice from them? Because I don't want to call 911. I don't want to overreact, but maybe let's talk to a professional and just
Mm-hmm.
see what they think. Just to open that conversation and invite
Mm-hmm.
the person into the process of contacting 988 and giving them your reasoning as a loving friend or family
Mm-hmm.
member as to why you want to. And that's where that third part, refer, comes into, which is referring to a professional. And that would be either going directly with somebody to the emergency room if they're saying, hey, I think I'm going to kill myself. I'm going to do this particular thing and I have access to it. Then that would be a situation where you would want to get them immediate help. If you're with them and can keep them safe in that moment, encouraging them to go. But if you're not there, you know that they have access, or you're there and they may take action even while you're there, then calling 911 is the best route. But yeah, sometimes just opening that conversation, saying, hey, like, hey, I'm not the expert here, and this topic, it kind of scares me that you're having these thoughts. Can we maybe text 988? That can be a really powerful way.
It's anonymous. Yeah.
It is.
So
yes,
there's that. And 988, yeah, it's great. If you or a loved one is in crisis and needs support, they also have translation services for 250 languages. So that's amazing. There also, the statistics is more than 98% of Lifeline interactions are resolved without involving 911. So that's pretty amazing. That shows you how effective they are, and that they are the experts. They also, as you mentioned earlier, provide referrals to local treatment providers. So it's like getting to the root of what's making somebody feel like they no longer want to be here. Like, what's the root of that problem, and helping that person find whatever resource they need to feel like they can keep going on, keep moving on.
Yeah.
Right? Stay here and work through it. And we want you here. We love you. We want you here. And and we're going to help you, stay here and help you with your situation.
Yeah. And also on 988, just to kind of plug my own personal thoughts about it. I love the 988 Lifeline, and in 2022 when they rolled it out, they did a whole process of interviewing people who had reached out to the crisis line before and asking them, what did you like about the crisis services, and what could have been better? How can we make this better? And using that feedback from people with lived experience is how they developed the protocol for the new 988 crisis line, which is pretty cool. I also I like to tell people that, of course, if you're in crisis, whether that's you're having some kind of extreme emotion, you're feeling really angry or really sad or really worried about something, that you can reach out to 988, of course. But also, if you're feeling alone or you just feel like you want someone to talk to for a little bit, they have the capacity to take those calls and texts as well. So before you get to a crisis point, you can text in, just be like, hey, I'm kind of feeling alone. Would you be able to talk to me for a little bit? And that they can do that. If you're worried about somebody else, then you can reach out to them as well, and ask for their advice. Like, hey, I have this friend who posted this on Facebook, and I really don't know what to do. Then they can give advice, and they can recommend what to do even on Facebook's end. Like, oh, go into this setting and send this. I don't know that they'd get that specific, but they might, to that point, kind of give you advice on what to do in those situations as well. And I can say that for me, I've reached out to 988 before when I've been struggling in the past, and it can be a really big support, especially having that text function. Because I know for myself, sometimes making that phone call, it takes a lot of energy for me to call a family member and talk to the phone on them, let alone when I'm struggling and it's a stranger. So texting can be a really powerful way to still get that support without having to go too far outside your comfort zone to where you're just like, well, I guess I just won't ask for help because I'm not calling.
That's a good point. That's a good point. And also, I love that 988, they provide follow-up within 24 to 72 hours, which 80% of callers have stated had helped to prevent a suicide attempt following their call. So that's huge. I think follow-up is huge. Really, it really is. And that piece is so important, to check in with that person in a day or two or three and say, how you doing? How's it going? How you thinking? What are your thoughts? What do you need help with? Or whatever,
Yeah, and I think it goes to illustrate that 988 cares. Like, to that person, it's one thing to reach out to somebody in a crisis, and then it's like, well, that was their job, you know, or they don't really care. They just answered the phone because they have to. But then when you have someone actually following up with you, like, hey, after that conversation the other day, how are you doing now? And just showing that follow up and maintaining that connection is huge. Because, like I was saying, connection is protection. And having a sense of belonging as well as social support is one of the biggest protective factors against suicide. And that can be, it sounds like it can be a tall order to support the people around us, or knowing what to do to help people who are suicidal. And it can be as simple as checking in with a friend, or making it a point to make eye contact with someone you see in public, or giving them a compliment, holding the door open, which sounds so small and trivial, but it can be that first, that small part that changes someone's trajectory of their day. And it also goes into hope, which is another huge protective factor against suicide. Because we know that one of the major warning signs of suicide is hopelessness. So feeling like things won't get better, I can't do this, there's no one to help me through this, so what's the point? And hope then is the opposite, and that can go directly into social support, where we say, you know, things might get better, and things do kind of suck right now, but I have someone who believes that I can get through this. Or, you know, this is a really difficult situation, and I have people that are willing to help me. And then when we factor in having a sense of purpose, too, and that could be having close relationships. That's our sense of purpose. Our family members, you know, our pets, or a hobby that we really enjoy. That all of those things go into building hope, which is the most protective thing against suicide. But yeah.
Hope. There's hope, and there's light, and there's always people out here who care. How do we want to end this? And obviously we covered 988 and knowing the signs, and anything else you want to add?
I could briefly mention that with the Tennessee Suicide Prevention Network, we're always looking for volunteers, and our volunteers do a number of things. This would be supporting outreach and advocacy events that we have, sitting at tables with us for those events, helping set up, also doing community-wide campaigns. So for a 988 campaign that we're working on, that might be taking 988 resources to your favorite coffee shop. Or if you're in school, handing resources out on campus. And we meet the third Thursday of every month at 9:30. We have a hybrid meeting, so that's available through Zoom and our main office on Murfreesboro Pike. But yeah.
Is that in Nashville?
It is, okay. Yes. Yeah.
Do you guys have a website?
We do.
Is it tspn.org?
tspn.org. And if you're interested in volunteering as well, that is tspn.org/volunteer.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much for being here, Hannah. And I would just like to reach out and say, I definitely want to partner with your organization and start, just putting things in place, growing this movement and getting other like-minded organizations. I mentioned the AFSP earlier. We have Advocacy Day, February the 5th. There's going to be, last year there were over 100 organizations there advocating for public safety legislation. Some of these were Rise and Shine, Voices for Safer Tennessee, Moms Demand Action, Mothers Over Murder. There's so many, and People come from all over the state, students, adults, whoever can be there. So, and anyone's, welcome to come, and we actually talk face to face to our legislators. And we tell, there's usually some sort of life-saving public safety legislation that we're pushing for that particular session, that the AFSP is sort of backing. Our allies, we have lots of allies in the House. Senator Heidi Campbell, Gloria Johnson, Justin Pearson, Justin Jones, Jason Powell. There's just so many. I mean, and we're all working together to try to, advocate for public safety policies that will help our cause and help our movement so that we can help other people. And I just wanted to, on that note, taking back our lives from whatever is our next release. I'm trying to segue this. Our next release of Neon Angels is called Taking Back My Life, and it's sort of an autobiographical about the trauma and abuse and things that happened to me in my life. Aaron actually directed it, and I'm so excited about it. The video's coming out, the single's coming out in January, and it's called Taking Back My Life with suicide prevention in mind, mental health awareness in mind, because almost all of us have something that we feel is maybe we just can't quite get control of. We just can't quite win in our lives. We're constantly struggling. Maybe it's a person, maybe it's a thing, maybe it's a job, maybe it's a bill, or whatever, So this is sort of an anthem to kind of take back your life, and it's hope. So be looking for that. And again, thank you, Hannah, for being here. I can't wait to work together.
Yeah.
And help people and save lives. And Aaron, same thing. We're all on the same page. And that's it for this episode. Thank you guys. Neon Angels Power Hour. Woohoo. Thanks for being here. Rock on. And be alive in 25.